The 2023 hurricane season is officially in the books, and it was, well, close to a record-setting year in some regards. This was the hurricane season list for this year, and notice we almost got completely through the name list. The only two that we didn't get to were Vince and Whitney, but other than that, another very active season with not only just the 20 named storms, which would be the fourth most, but we also had 7 hurricanes and 3 major hurricanes. This year, we expected El Nino to bring a lot of wind shear to the Atlantic basin, which it honestly did, but that wind shear, which is not good for tropical storms and hurricanes to form, that was almost completely negated by very, very warm sea surface temperatures across the Atlantic, Gulf of Mexico, and into the Caribbean Sea. Only one U.S. hurricane landfall this year, but there were 6 storms that impacted the U.S. and Canada from multiple different basins as well. Taking a look back at the start of the 2023 hurricane season, yeah, you see that right. That is January 15th, 2023. Now, typically, whenever there's a slowdown in tropical storm activity, which happens, well, for the beginning of the year, the National Hurricane Center can go back and reanalyze storms. And they found that an area of low pressure just off the coast of the United States at the beginning of the year, the middle of January, briefly became subtropical as it zapped up some of the warm waters over the Gulf Stream. So this would have been a named storm, but since it happened and then was reanalyzed to have happened, it is Subtropical Storm 1. The actual start of the 2023 hurricane season, June 1st, well, it started off a little bit fast with our first named storm, Arlene, just a couple of hundred miles off the coast of Florida. That brought some rain to Florida and Cuba, but not terribly much more than that. Took a little bit of a break for the middle of June until we got to about June 20th, right around the summer solstice, when both Tropical Storm Brett and Tropical Storm Cindy formed just over the open waters of the Atlantic. Both of those storms dissipating really before they impacted much land. After those 2 storms, the next one on the list was Don, which really didn't form until the middle of July, so almost about a month between Cindy and Don. And Don just kind of spun its wheels out there in the open waters of the Atlantic, but it did become the season's first hurricane. We got a lull, a nice lull, in fact, from Don to our next named storm. But once that next named storm formed right in the middle of August, the frequency of these tropical storms and hurricanes greatly impacted. Almost 3 simultaneous storms forming at once: Tropical Storm Emily, Tropical Storm Gert, and Tropical Storm Franklin towards the middle of August. Now, outside of all of those storms, Franklin was one that not only moved across Hispaniola, but eventually became the season's first major hurricane a couple of hundred miles off the coast of the United States. Now, from there, Tropical Storm Harold made landfall in far south Texas, and then just shortly after Harold formed, we had Idalia, which was the season's only United States landfalling hurricane, making landfall as a major hurricane along Florida's Big Bend late in August, becoming the first time that Florida's Big Bend has ever seen a major hurricane landfall. Yet another year, the 5th time since 2017 that we have seen a major hurricane make landfall in the state of Florida. As we moved into September, more frequency of those tropical storms coming off of Africa. Katia, we also had Lee out there, both of those not really impacting any land, at least for a while for Lee, but it did become the season's first major hurricane in the beginning of September, eventually weakening, taking a path up towards Maine and Nova Scotia. From there, we went from Lee to Margot and Katia. Nigel was out there as well. Philippe, you saw that storm right there. There's Rena. There's also Tropical Storm Sean that was out in the middle of the Atlantic as well, and also 2 tropical depressions which moved through the Caribbean Sea towards the latter half of the season. But it was just a very active season from the middle of August all the way up to about the end of September. Now, I mentioned 6 storms impacted the United States. Well, only a couple of those storms were actually in the Atlantic basin. The other 3 were in the Pacific. August 1st, Dora formed just off the coast of Mexico. Now, Dora became a major hurricane and passed just a couple of hundred miles to the south of Hawaii, but Hurricane Dora's strong winds, the counterclockwise flow, helped to cause those wildfires in the summer in Hawaii to really grow and blossom, literally fanning the flames, even though this hurricane didn't actually move ashore into any landmass. From there, we also had Eastern Pacific Storm Hillary, which became a hurricane moving ashore in Baja California, bringing heavy rain and flooding to California, also causing the first ever tropical storm warning to be issued for Southern California thanks to that system. After that, the Pacific season was mostly quiet until the big one happened, and that was Hurricane Otis, which formed and rapidly strengthened just off the coast of Mexico in about 24 hours time. Otis strengthened from a tropical storm into a Category 5 hurricane, which absolutely decimated the coastal community of Acapulco, becoming the first Category 5 hurricane to make landfall on Mexico's west coast. And of course, Hurricane Otis impacted central Texas's weather as well, with over 20 inches of rain falling in parts of Bosque County, really starting to chip away at some of that drought, which is great. But of course, we still do need some more rain. The 2024 hurricane season is in sight. That's the next one up, and this is the name list for you. This name list was last used 6 years ago in 2018, and I do want to point out there are two new names to the list this year: Francine, which replaced Hurricane Florence, and we also have Milton, which replaced Hurricane Michael. Of course, that was a Category 5 storm moving its way into Florida. Now, the 2024 hurricane season, we have a long time to go until we get there, but long-range data is suggesting that El Nino is going to end, which means with an El Nino neutral or La Nina conditions that we could have a little bit more of an active season, and especially if a La Nina forms and returns as we move into the 2024 hurricane season, it'll be an active year yet again next year.